Hi everyone, my name is Mykola Bielieskov. I'm research fellow at the Ukrainian National Institute for Strategic Studies and also a senior analyst of the biggest non-governmental charity COBADEFFXXX, which is aiding Ukrainian armed forces. It's not about Ukrainian territories. So war is going on Ukrainian territory. It's Ukrainian population, it's Ukrainian infrastructure that is suffering most, but this war is not about Ukraine, only Ukraine. So it's about the European and Euro-Atlantic security architecture, because if you recall, when Russia was laying a justification for its aggression against Ukraine, it's actually published two kind of agreements, one between US and Russia and another between NATO and Russia. And the idea was to create a power vacuum in Central and Eastern Europe, to create venue for Russian power projections. So this war is first and foremost between Russia and Ukraine, but it's not about Ukraine only. And that's why if people frame this war and frame any hypothetical settlements in terms of let Ukraine give Putin another piece of Ukrainian territories, they are making wrong conclusions from this war and from the stakes of this war and major issues which are the source of Russian aggressive policy. So it's more than about Ukraine. It's about principles which underpin current Euro-Atlantic security order. It's about Europe whole, free and at peace with itself. Usually the price of inaction is bigger eventually, and we already have this example. So in 2014-15, most politicians and majority of citizens, they assumed that it's easier to conclude another ceasefire, to conclude another frozen agreement. Just on basis of this kind of agreement, we can have relations with Russia instead of strengthening Ukraine preemptively. Then events of 2022 happened, and it became obvious that, it might have been cheaper to aid Ukraine preemptively and even maybe to prevent this war. So currently the stakes are the following one. Either Ukraine is aided in self-defense and battle is confined to southern and eastern Ukraine, or another scenario is for NATO countries to confront Russia somewhere else, maybe in Baltic states, because even now, after the reinforcements brought by NATO after 2022, military footprint in Central and Eastern Europe is a light one compared with Cold War, when Western Germany was militarized with much bigger footprint. So it's cheaper eventually to aid Ukraine and do it at speedier tempo than implementing another bunch of measures, bringing, for instance, I don't know, maybe 1/2 of US Army to ensure proper deterrent effect. So it's always necessary to keep in mind not only the price and risks of action, as usually done by politicians, that's the mode of their action, but also the price and risk of inaction. And we already have an example of Western policy towards original Russian aggression that made clear that it's cheaper to confront aggressive state, revisionist state here and now than do it at conditions that deteriorate at a bigger price and with larger involvement of NATO countries themselves. The major mistake, as for me, was that while balancing two considerations, military one and political one, eventually choice was done which emphasized political considerations. So what I mean, when this war started, when this round of war started on 24th of February 2022, Washington and its allies, including German government, they have a problem. So on the one hand, you need to aid Ukraine's self-defense, which is natural, because there is UN Charter clause about self-defense. And again, that's a natural response when there is a revisionist state. But on the other side, there is this problem that Russia is a nuclear armed country. Russia is a big country. It's about stability. If Russia start to lose and maybe start to collapse, and there were these two considerations, military one and political one. You need to aid self-defense, but in such a way that preclude Russian breach of nuclear taboo. Eventually, as we've seen, political considerations outweighed military considerations, because if military logic prevailed, it meant that there won't be these pauses each time for US and its partners to debate whether this or that capability is necessary. And this or that capability, when it eventually approved, it won't be provided in part and parcel, so in small measures. The major mistake, as for me, was made during April, October 2022, because that was a unique period when Russians were still making a lot of mistakes, trying to attain too much with too little, without announcing a major round of mobilization. And at the end of August, at the beginning of September 2022, there was a unique situation when Russian forces were overstretched and frontline was undermanned. Under some assessments, there was only 100,000 combat-ready troops for almost 1,100 kilometers front line, so you can calculate the density of troops. And Ukraine, unfortunately, at that time, it was not aided to prevail, it was aided just not to lose. And there was this minimalist consensus, so-called, that Ukraine shouldn't lose, Russia shouldn't win. And the capabilities they were provided specifically for this, that's why we missed this period of unique Russian vulnerability. Ukrainian successes might have been even bigger ones. So 2022 is considered as a year of Ukrainian success. But in counterfactual, in a hypothetical scenario, if Ukraine was aided properly, not under the scenario of prevent Ukraine from losing, prevent Russia from winning, we might have this opportunity and exploit it even further, maybe liberating all temporary lost territories after 24th of February 2022, or even coming to Crimea. And then when Russian leadership finally admitted the fact that, yes, they need to do something to defend the front line, and called mobilization, and implemented another bunch of measures associated with General Surovikin, this moment was lost. And this period of maneuver warfare that ended in November 2022, the fact that war, it moved from a war of movement into a war of positional attritional fighting, that's unfortunately a great achievement for Russia, and it works in Russian favor, unfortunately. And it's a great failure, and it's a great lost opportunity by Ukraine and its partners. So that's the major turning point in this war. And everything we have now, I mean, the inability of both our opponent, but also for Ukraine to change frontline quickly, it stems from this period of extreme Russian vulnerability that was missed. The first thing that should be done better is to admit that crisis management mode is not working. It's not sustainable. Because the whole Western policy before, in this 2+ years of big war, it's a crisis management. Crisis management is about measures taken belatedly, measures taken at the last moment when the situation deteriorates. And we've seen it in 2022, and we've seen it in 2024. So the first thing is to finally stop to do a crisis management and start to do strategy. Strategy is about proper balance between end, ways, and means. And yeah, there is a problem how to persuade people to engage more resources. That's a problem because we see a byproduct of this crisis management mode. It was so difficult to persuade US Congress to approve another package. So we need to switch from crisis management mode to strategic mode. And after this change of mode of action, we need to finally translate nominal Western technological and economic advantage into actual battlefield advantage. Because now we have a very strange situation when NATO countries, when they come together, when they assemble, and now they celebrate 75 years of NATO founding, and they say we are dozens of times richer than Russia, we are more sophisticated technologically than Russia, and Russia has more artillery shells. And that's a big irony, and that's a big tragedy. So eventually, this war, result of this war, it depends on one thing, whether NATO countries, which means both politicians and citizens, able to translate this notional latent advantage into actual advantage. So that's another issue. And the driver for this behavior should be precisely understanding of stakes, because Russia called into question everything that was done after 1945. And we've seen already after Russian regional aggression in 2014, 2015, that price of inaction is bigger one, and you can turn aggressive revisionist state into status quo power, but by another round of concessions. So Russia should be confronted by preponderant power of Western countries, which in practice translate in a proper amount of munitions, capabilities, training, and all other things, because otherwise we'll see this continuation of just barely enough, which is not working. And by the way, we've seen it before the war in a political and military dimension, an economic dimension. So Western countries supported Ukraine to the extent that ensured its existence, but not enough to persuade Russia to accept its statehood. Now the situation is happening on the front line. So Ukraine is supported barely enough to survive, but not enough to persuade Russia to reconcile with Ukrainian existence. So these are the three most important things to do: to switch from crisis management to strategic approach, to translate nominal economic and technical advantage into actual advantage, and to bring such a preponderant power that make Russia reconcile with Ukrainian statehood and make any settlement durable and sustainable. Russians are conducting comprehensive exhaustion strategies that involves both military and non-military instrument. And for sure, a comprehensive strategy should involve other dimensions, not only military one, but for instance, trying to be more competitive in information dimension, trying to bridge the barrier that Russia created between Western media and the Russian population. Because we have a very strange situation. During Cold War, it was Voice of America and Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, that was a major source of information for Soviet citizens. And Soviet citizens didn't trust their own government. And now we have opposite situation when for Western countries, it's very difficult to get to Russian population and to affect in proper way Russian perception, while Russia is able to wage quite successful influence operation, targeting both Ukrainian audience and different Western audiences and audiences in Latin America, Middle East, Asia, and so on. So it should be a comprehensive approach involving sanctions, involving information dimension, but military is also a very important one, because Russian identity is based on their own reading of victory in World War II. It's actually a myth created by them. For sure, they prevailed in World War II, also including Ukrainian population that was a part of the Red Army, so-called. But their reading of this victory, it's a myth, actually. So we need to deprive Russians of this myth. We need to defeat them militarily. And by depriving Russians of this founding basis of their current great power, chauvinist, revisionist identity, that's the only way how we can push them to post-imperial transition. So military defeat, classic military defeat, it's integral part of any comprehensive strategy to confront Russian revisionism, but it's not the only one. As for me, another thing is to be really competitive in information dimension, to demonstrate in creative way, I don't know, through TikTok, through other venues, channels, the whole void between Russian statements and actual Russian policy, and to demonstrate to Russian population that the policy that their government is pursuing is detriment to their own interest, real one. So that's also very important, because now we have this irony when Russia is able to influence foreign audiences more effectively than Western media, Western publications are able to affect Russian population.